Welcome to Loyalty Discussions with White Label Loyalty, where we cover everything you need to know about customer loyalty, retention, and rewards. We're interviewing experts from all industries to help you keep your customers coming back for more. Hello, and a massive warm welcome back to Loyalty Discussions with White Label Loyalty. We are so excited to be back, and today we're going to go right back to basics, and we're going to talk about all the reasons why loyalty programs fail. So if you're interested in loyalty, you are in the perfect place, because we're going to cover all of the key problems that businesses face when creating a loyalty program so you can avoid them and get it right first time. So in this episode, I'm joined with Christina Kroblova, who is our marketing manager here at White Label Loyalty. Welcome back, Christina.
Thanks. It's so exciting to be back.
So this episode is intended for anyone interested in loyalty who wants to really go back to basics and understand what current context of loyalty is and the state of loyalty today. We're going to start with a stat which might surprise some of you. 75% of loyalty programs fail, and this is absolutely crazy. So Christina, could you suggest one of the reasons why so many loyalty programs are failing?
Sure, yeah, it is insane. It sounds crazy, but once we start digging into it, I think it'll start making sense. So I'll start with another stat that will probably shock you. Can you believe that with 5.2 billion mobile phone users in the world today, over 50% of all loyalty programs are not available on mobile? What's that about? So I think the lack of digitization that is really shocking to me as a millennial is one of the key reasons why loyalty programs fail, because some are still just operating on a little paper with a stamp card type of model, and it's very outdated. And one of the reasons why that fails is because it doesn't really give anything back to the business. As much as it might be working, you'll never know, because there's no data. It's really difficult to track something like that. And so it's the best black hole for your money when it comes to a loyalty strategy.
Absolutely. And in 2022, we have customers that are really expecting to interact with brands on digital platforms. This all happened so quickly because of the pandemic, and everyone's kind of got used to shopping on their phones, online, and the brands that are kind of still working in an offline context are just starting to fall behind, because customers aren't interested in interacting that way anymore. There's a couple other reasons that we find why loyalty programs fail. Could you just briefly cover what those are?
Sure. So what are the other reasons? As you mentioned, obviously business is still happening offline, but today there's so much technology available that can easily bring the online and offline together, that there really isn't any good reason to not have a digital program. But the other reason why having a digital program is important is because it allows personalization. And this is one of the other reasons why many programs fail, because they don't really recognize the importance of personalization that goes beyond just using a first and last name instead of their user. It really is about understanding the customer, getting closer to the customer, and so many programs get this wrong.
We still see a lot of loyalty programs out there that are transactional only. Why do you think that transactional only loyalty programs aren't successful anymore?
The customers are now looking to connect with the brands that they're buying from, maybe not every single brand, but those that they really care about, those where they might actually be loyal to. And so by really offering a relationship that's purely transactional to the customers, it's a bit of a letdown, I think, for them, because they want to interact with them, and they most likely interact with them in other forms, such as they follow them on social media and they like their posts, or they talk about them with their friends. And all of these things are opportunities for brands to recognize that loyalty and give something back to the customers. And if they don't do that, there might be some sort of resentment building up on the side of the customers, which is why we think event-based loyalty and emotional loyalty is so incredibly important today.
So in summary, the reasons why so many loyalty programs fail are because there's a lack of digitization, there's a lack of personalization, and there's a lack of flexibility. There's also something that we find like quite a widespread belief that loyalty programs are perhaps a bit outdated. When you think about loyalty programs, you don't always necessarily associate them with like being a modern solution. However, people really need to consider creating loyalty programs in 2022 and beyond. We'd argue that loyalty programs are perhaps more important than they've ever been. We know this because customers are demanding more, and because of the increased digitization that we're seeing, switching to competitors is easier than ever, and customers will do it very quickly. As soon as they're not happy with the experience they're getting, they'll instantly switch to a competitor that's offering something that they want. So this is why brands really need to consider what kind of customer experience they're offering when it comes to a loyalty program. And another thing that is really important to add is how important rewards can be in the current cost of living crisis. With rising prices across the board, a lot of brands aren't going to be able to compete on price anymore. Often, most brands are having to pass that price increase on to the end customer. So it's really about what can you do to give your customers a reason to stay. If you can't compete on price, what else can you compete on? Well, you can consider what kind of experience you're giving to your customer. And it's really about adding more value. And value doesn't have to come in the form of cheaper prices. It can come in the form of really exciting rewards. So what we're seeing is so many brands this year are starting to invest in their loyalty programs because they know that's giving extra value to their customer and an extra reason for customers to stick with them. In terms of the kind of trends that we're seeing in customer loyalty this year, it really goes back to the reasons that we covered on why loyalty programs fail. The market has obviously become so digitized now that customers want and expect to interact with brands on digital platforms. And if businesses are not evolving their strategies to facilitate digital experiences, then they're simply going to fall behind. One of the trends that we're seeing at the moment is the importance of creating a customer experience that's really easy for the end customer. And sometimes that means kind of being able to marry up the online and offline channels and having access to software that can really make the customer experience easy across any kind of channel.
Definitely, it's one of the complications that we see the most with brands, and understandably so. It is really quite difficult, and every single situation is different. But there's lots of technology that can help you do that, and with the right partner in place, you can definitely find something that works for your customers and for your brands.
And previously, you briefly touched on event-based loyalty. Could you discuss a little bit more about what that means?
It's a really exciting time, as you kind of highlighted already, with the cost of living crisis, and brands are looking to reward their customers in a different way that either it doesn't cost them as much money or kind of aligns with their future strategy more. So what's important to say is that even though you might not want to give direct discounts for your products so that you don't miss out on your margin, you can still pretty much give either cash back, or you can still give more monetary value back to the customer. But when it's done through something that gives more value to you as a brand, such as a loyalty program, where you're actually getting, in exchange for their business, you're getting more data, and in exchange for that, you give them rewards that obviously are costing you some money. So when you compare it, it might still work out similar, but the difference is that they might still be getting the value that they need or the money back so that they can afford to buy that product again soon. But you're also really understanding how they're shopping with you, how they're interacting with you, and who they are, what they stand for, what they like, what they don't like, and all these different things that a loyalty program can help you do. So I just then I said shopping and interacting. So how this goes back to the event-based loyalty. What does that look like? I've already touched on the social media. So there's ways that you can incentivize for your clients to follow you on social media, but also to perhaps share your content when you're running a specific campaign on social media, for example, and you need it to kind of go further. It can help you with your reach if you incentivize your most trusted and loyal customers to also share it, and you give them some incentive, such as points back for that. That's possible. If we've got some really interesting examples from our clients, some of our B2B clients, they go in to visit their customers, their B2B customers in person with their sales reps, for example. And what some of them have put into place is that they, for example, reward if they see that they merchandise the product they've bought from that brand well. So if they showcase it in store nicely, that's something that they can incentivize, which is so nice and exciting and different. And I'm sure that really helps to improve the relationship between that client and the brand, because I'm sure that not that many other brands in that sector will be doing that, right? And that instantly it makes you feel valued, that somebody recognized the good work that you did. And that's similar, that can also happen in the B2C space for sure. One of the most used kind of events that we see are referrals, word of mouth. We all know that word of mouth is a holy grail that we all aspire to get, for people to talk about our brand by themselves with friends, and it's also the cheapest acquisition tool that you could find. And so being able to incentivize it and also track it is just invaluable for brands. So we try to work with our clients quite a lot on coming up with referral campaigns within their loyalty programs as well. So those are just some of the examples, but there's plenty. You can use your existing data that you already have in your CRM, for example, things that you know about your customers that you can then use to say, okay, well, we know that they like this brand, but we think that if they like this brand, they might also like this other brand that's under our umbrella. So how about if we run a campaign that, if you also buy this brand in your next purchase, you might get this type of reward back. It might actually drive cross-sell in your strategy. So it's really quite powerful to be able to just set up completely custom rules in your rewarding structures and mechanics, just based on pretty much any type of data point that you can get your hands on.
And it all really comes back to recognizing people and showing appreciation for the ways that they engage with your business. It's a really simple idea, really. It's customers that get something back when they engage with your business are way more likely to stick with you rather than switch to a competitor. Rewards, it may seem quite a simple idea, but it's a really strong way of keeping your retention rates high, especially in the current climate. Another stat that's interesting to share is that customers expect personalization. So 71% of consumers expect companies to deliver personalized interactions. So it's not even that it's what they want anymore, it's what they expect. So if you are not meeting these expectations, you're already kind of falling behind in the customer's mind. So you have to really remember that customers these days are receiving so many messages from so many brands. So you need to be able to stand out. And another thing that we talk about a lot at White Label Loyalty is the link between personalization and emotional loyalty. Could you explain a little bit about what emotional loyalty is and why personalization and emotional loyalty are so tightly linked?
We recognize generally two types of loyalty: a transactional loyalty and an emotional loyalty. So some cynics, I would say, when it comes to brand loyalty, will say, well, there's no such thing, because there's always going to be something that can come along and it will make you break your loyalty. I'd say that it very much depends on your definition of loyalty. You know, in some sectors, it is pretty much impossible to create customer loyalty in the sense of they only buy from your brand, never from your competitors. But if you look at it from a more realistic point of view, you know, transactional loyalty is very, very common. It's pretty much just your preference or consumer's preference for a certain brand or for a certain product for whatever reason they might have. But then there's this difference between just buying the brand or the product for some sort of utilitarian reason when it comes to the transaction itself, and buying from a brand for reasons that are other than just monetary or utilitarian. So whether it's because you saw a campaign from a brand where they said how, you know, what great work they do in the charity space, and that really resonated with you, and next time you went into the shop to buy that product, you thought, you know what, I buy from this brand because I know they do good work. Or whether it's because they entertained you through I don't know, their TikToks, for example, and that made you engage. So next time it might not even be you know, it might be their subconscious making them choose that brand. So the difference between emotional loyalty and transactional loyalty is huge when it comes to the real potential for brands. Because if you manage to get a real relationship between your customer and your brand, to start creating that emotional bond based on your brand values and the customer's values, they might be, you know, meeting somewhere in the middle, or it might be something else about what you do that they appreciate. That means that you're doing something right. That's really worth pursuing.
There's clearly quite a few challenges when it comes to getting loyalty right. So brands really need to make sure that they're operating on digital platforms. They need to make sure they're getting personalization right, and they need to be flexible enough to reward any kind of behavior and not just stick with the traditional transactional only loyalty programs. So what would you say is the kind of overarching problem? Is there something that all of these issues have in common? What is the biggest problem when it comes to customer loyalty and getting it right?
It's an interesting question, because yes, there's so many reasons that loyalty programs fail, and also so many reasons why many brands haven't pursued the kind of avenue of at least formal loyalty programs. But yes, I do think that there's one underlying reason that kind of underpins all these problems, and that's data, and specifically understanding of customer data. So in our view at White Label Loyalty, we've always been really passionate about data-driven loyalty, and there's a good reason for that. When a brand doesn't truly understand their customer and the customer's preferences, desires, needs, it's almost impossible to, well, it is impossible to create that relationship. It would have to be quite random, and you need to have some luck, which obviously isn't the greatest business strategy. So in order to create that, you know, bond, emotional bond, and start creating the brand customer relationship that I talked about previously, you really need to get closer to your customers. And these days, as you mentioned, it's super difficult ever since the pandemic, even more so, because there's so much competition and everyone's online and everyone's collecting data. We find that really separates the average brands from the really good brands is not just collecting data and having data, but understanding it and using it. So we always differentiate between customer data and customer insight. Customer insight is when you use the data to look into it, to get real insights that you can use for your strategies as a basis, as almost a hypothesis for why you're doing certain things. Me coming from a marketing point of view, this resonates extremely, because I always try for our own company to, we only set strategies based on facts and data that we know. I think that's something that everyone should aspire to, really. And so it's the same thing with customer loyalty. You shouldn't just assume and act. You need to know the facts and you need to understand them first. Without the real customer insight, it's really difficult to personalize successfully, because if you don't have clean data and if you don't have a real understanding of how you can use the data that you've already collected, then it'll be really difficult to offer something that's quite personalized and trying to really nail down that specific need or the problem or the desire of that customer or of the customer segment. And so this comes back to the, one of the reasons that loyalty programs fail is the lack of personalization. So it all comes back to data and to real customer insight. And I know that is really difficult for certain companies, especially the bigger the enterprise goes, the more difficult it is to work with data because there's so much of it. And so being able to connect all the data sources and work with it properly is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point to make, because most companies these days are collecting data and they're collecting a lot of it, but it doesn't really matter how much data you collect unless you really understand it. And as you just mentioned, there's a lot of businesses out there that struggle with data silos. So data is kind of fragmented all across their business and they don't really have one platform that gives them a 360 view of their customer. And that's really the problem, because if you don't have one place to understand your customer and understand them in a way that takes in data from the whole customer journey, then you're never really going to be able to do these things like personalize and give them the right rewards and give them the right kind of messaging. So it's one thing collecting data, but it's a whole other thing being able to actually do things with it. On that note, we are going to explore in a lot more detail this key issue of data in the next episode. It's important to know what kind of data and what kind of insights you need. So in part 2, we'll talk you through all of the solutions to this data problem. And we're going to break down the different types of data capture that is available, who they are best for, and how they work. Tune in to the next part to understand how to get the key problem of data right the first time. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify channel. You can also find us on the social media channels like LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us, Christina, and we'll see you in the next episode.